Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a web of really important issues.
hmm
Things like how pornography addiction impacts our sense of self, our ability to connect with others.
Right. And also those often unspoken, often unrealistic expectations we face around sex.
Exactly. And crucially, the journey towards healing and, a healthier understanding of our own sexuality.
And for this exploration, we've gathered a pretty diverse range of sources. We'll be hearing some powerful personal stories from men grappling with porn addiction.
Okay.
We're looking at research, too, on the crucial link between body image and sexual confidence.
Great. Body image.
We'll dissect this concept of sexpectations, these expectations that shape our experiences.
Expectations, yeah.
Examining guidance on reestablishing intimacy after sexual sobriety, understanding those persistent sexual double
And
standards.
they're still around.
Oh, definitely. Considering the role toxic masculinity plays in our sexual lives, and finally analyzing the pervasive impact of media on how we see sex, relationships, even violence.
So our goal today is really to extract the core insights from all this material. We want to understand the complexities surrounding pornography use, those hidden sexual expectations that can, trip us up,
Mm-hmm.
and what that path towards a more fulfilling relationship with ourselves and others actually entails. We're aiming for a comprehensive, yet hopefully digestible understanding for you.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with those initial difficult steps into addiction.
Yeah, the personal accounts we looked at, they paint a really vivid picture of what that rock bottom moment can feel like. Several men use strikingly similar language, words like hidden, scared, profoundly alone.
Alone, yeah.
There's this recurring sense of emotional numbness, a feeling like life has lost its meaning and being trapped. Trapped in a cycle they just can't seem to break free from.
That feeling of being hidden speaks volumes, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
shame, the secrecy that often surrounds addiction.
It really does. And it creates such a barrier to connection. It just unfortunately keeps the cycle going.
Dane said there felt like no escaping, even when he'd achieved things he thought would bring him satisfaction.
Right.
And Max's image of sinking slowly into a swamp, that really hits home. That feeling of being completely stuck, losing all power.
It's just succumbing to it.
Yeah. When we hear these descriptions, it makes you wonder, is there like a common thread in what leads to this feeling of entrapment?
That's a crucial question. Kevin's analogy, feeling like a rat in a cage being pumped full of a drug,
Wow.
but also being the scientist in that cruel experiment, that's particularly insightful.
How so?
Well, it highlights the internal conflict, doesn't it? A part of them recognizes the harm, but another part feels completely compelled. These weren't people necessarily unaware of the problem.
Right, they knew.
They were just caught in this really powerful loop, and this internal battle likely contributes significantly to that feeling of being stuck, powerless.
Absolutely. And the way this played out in their daily lives was, well, quite stark.
Yeah.
Sneaking time at work, that compulsion to wake up early, just for that fix. Even experiencing physical consequences like erectile dysfunction at a young age, which Kevin and Ian both mentioned.
Right. ED.
And Mark talked about spending what he called an unhinged amount of time. 20 to 30 hours a week, just viewing pornography.
That's staggering.
Completely draining his energy, his drive. It really underscores how all-consuming this can become. Were there any other common threads in how it manifested daily?
Yeah, several accounts mentioned a growing sense of isolation, a detachment from other areas of life they once enjoyed.
Like hobbies?
Hobbies, friends, social stuff, even just basic responsibilities often took a backseat to the addiction. And this gradual erosion of other meaningful activities, it just reinforces that feeling of being trapped.
Yeah.
Trapped in a very narrow and ultimately pretty unsatisfying existence.
So what does this all mean for someone going through this? Beyond those immediate feelings of being trapped, what are the deeper emotional and, relational consequences?
Oh, the emotional toll is substantial. We see mentions of deep-seated low self-esteem, a fundamental lack of self-worth. Individuals feeling they need to construct these false personas, masks, to hide their struggles and their pain.
The hiding again.
Exactly. The constant lying, the overwhelming shame and guilt, the ways they would actively self-sabotage, it all contributes to this pervasive sense of existing but not living, as Sean so poignantly put it.
Existing but not living, and that's powerful. And that need to mask their true selves probably stems from a fear of judgment, right? Believing the addiction makes them fundamentally flawed.
Absolutely. And the impact on their relationships sounds devastating. Sean described betraying partners through these shallow conversations and fantasies,
Hmm.
a real absence of true love and care for the people closest to them. It leads to profound isolation, a desensitization from genuine physical connection.
Ian even spoke about actively avoiding spending time with a girlfriend he deeply cared for. It's like the addiction creates this invisible wall.
Precisely. And if we connect this to broader psychological ideas, you can see how addiction hijacks those fundamental human needs for connection and intimacy.
It replaces them.
It replaces them with a solitary and ultimately unfulfilling substitute. And the physical consequences, like the erectile dysfunction reported by Kevin and Ian,
Yeah.
that creates further complications in intimate relationships. It can exacerbate feelings of shame, inadequacy. It just perpetuates a negative cycle.
But it's not entirely bleak, is it? These stories also offer glimpses of hope. Those turning points where people find the courage to seek help.
Absolutely. That's one of the most powerful takeaways from these narratives. The individuals struggling are often outwardly successful in many areas of their lives.
Right? It challenges stereotypes.
It really does. And the act of opening up about these deeply personal, often hidden struggles, whether it's to a partner, a therapist, a support group, it takes immense courage.
It's like breaking through that wall of isolation you mentioned.
Exactly. And it sounds like that act of sharing itself can be incredibly transformative.
Yeah, Chandler Rogers, the founder of Relay, mentioned that he personally never thought more highly of these individuals than after they shared their pain, their genuine desire for change.
That really makes you think about the power of vulnerability, doesn't it?
It does.
Sharing these deeply held secrets can foster such a profound sense of connection, mutual understanding. It directly combats the isolation that fuels addiction.
Great.
And it also underscores that the journey to quitting is deeply personal. It's not always some dramatic rock bottom moment.
No.
Sometimes it's a gradual realization, a dawning awareness of how far their lives have deviated from what they truly desire.
But this idea of rock bottom as a potential catalyst for change is still significant, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Even in those darkest moments, there seem to be these glimmers of profound truth, that recognition that no matter how bad things have become, change is still possible.
It's like hitting a floor that you can then push off from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the crucial role of hope here, it just can't be overstated. Hearing the experiences of others who've navigated similar challenges and found recovery.
It gives you belief. It's incredibly empowering. It provides that essential belief that a better future is indeed possible. And this is where communities like Relay, focused on group therapy, become so important. They offer a structured, supportive environment for this often difficult journey.
And once individuals embark on that path of recovery, what kind of positive changes do they start to experience?
The descriptions of transformation are really compelling. Ian described it as waking up from being a zombie,
Wow.
regaining the ability to feel emotions again, experiencing a heightened sense of intuition, the capacity for genuine emotional connection with others returns, leading to a profound sense of becoming a more authentic version of themselves. It's almost like the addiction was suppressing their true nature all along.
Dusty spoke about finding hope and a sense of direction by establishing healthy routines and connecting with that supportive community in Relay.
Yeah, that sense of belonging.
It really highlights how belonging can be a powerful antidote to the isolation of addiction.
Absolutely. And Dane, who felt like his marriage had become just a performance. He described dramatic positive shifts in his relationship with his wife. His expressions of love became more genuine. He finally felt truly seen, truly understood by her,
The need for secrecy dissolves.
replaced by honesty and a renewed sense of trust. And Sean highlighted the significant amount of time and mental energy he regained once freed from the addiction.
Time he could reinvest.
Exactly. In himself and his relationships.
And overall, it sounds like there's a really significant improvement in their overall well-being.
Totally. Kevin and Max both mentioned increased confidence, improvements in their physical, emotional, mental, social health.
A renewed optimism.
A renewed sense of optimism for the future. It's like they're reclaiming not just their time, but their entire lives.
What's particularly striking is this common thread, moving away from isolation and self-destructive patterns,
Towards connection.
towards meaningful connection, open honesty, and a more fully present, engaged way of living.
As one reflection noted, those years of struggle often paved the way for a deeper appreciation for life, a level of fulfillment they hadn't experienced before.
Okay, so this journey of recovery is deeply personal, but it also seems very closely linked to how we feel about ourselves, right?
Definitely.
Let's delve into that connection between self-esteem and our sexual health.
Yeah, research from the University of Arkansas makes it very clear. Our body image and our sexual self-esteem are deeply intertwined.
How so?
How we perceive our physical appearance has a significant impact on our confidence and our level of satisfaction in intimate relationships.
So negative feelings about our bodies.
They can lead to an unhealthy preoccupation with perceived flaws, increased self-consciousness during sex.
Which diminishes enjoyment.
Absolutely. It ultimately diminishes our enjoyment.
That makes intuitive sense. If you're constantly focused on what you don't like about your body, it's hard to be fully present and engaged in the moment of intimacy.
Precisely. And studies consistently show a strong correlation between having a positive body image and reporting higher levels of sexual satisfaction. When individuals feel a sense of acceptance and appreciation for their bodies, regardless of societal ideals, they tend to experience greater confidence, less anxiety.
And richer intimacy.
A richer sense of intimacy. A positive body image empowers us to fully participate in sexual experiences and to foster deeper emotional connections with our partners.
And conversely, negative body image can actually lead to avoiding intimacy altogether.
Yeah,
And a decrease in overall sexual enjoyment.
that's right.
So, what are some practical steps we can take to boost our self-esteem and sexual confidence?
Well, the University of Arkansas highlights several key strategies. Cultivating self-compassion is fundamental.
Treating ourselves kindly.
Treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend, and challenging those often unrealistic societal pressures.
Okay, what else?
Open and honest communication with our partners about our feelings, our desires, even our insecurities.
Yeah.
That can build mutual understanding and strengthen intimacy.
And therapeutic support.
Therapeutic support, like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, can be very helpful here.
How does CBT help?
CBT is a therapeutic approach that helps individuals identify and challenge negative thought patterns, in this case, thoughts related to self-image or sexual performance.
They also mention the importance of engaging with positive media, which, we'll discuss further later.
Right, media comes up again.
And the foundational aspects of self-acceptance, nurturing emotional bonds, and establishing healthy lifestyle habits.
I-
Sounds like a multifaceted approach is really necessary.
Absolutely. It's about developing a sense of self-acceptance that isn't dependent on external validation and nurturing those deeper emotional connections that enhance intimacy beyond just the physical aspects.
Now, shifting gears slightly to the realm of expectations. Laura Gation uses this term, sexpectations, and she argues these can be really problematic in our sexual lives. Why is that?
Gation emphasizes that when there is a significant disconnect between what we expect sex to be like and the reality of our experiences, it can lead to a range of difficulties. Things like decreased sexual desire, erectile problems, performance anxiety. We often carry around these idealized notions of what sex should be.
Are these sexpectations perhaps rooted in a fear of vulnerability? Or maybe a misunderstanding of intimacy as purely performative?
Could be both. Like that Hollywood image of constant simultaneous orgasms.
Right, the movie version.
Exactly. And the reality is that sex can sometimes be a little awkward, maybe even clumsy. And those perfectly synchronized movie-ending orgasms are actually quite rare in real life.
But focusing only on that outcome creates pressure.
A lot of unnecessary pressure and disappointment. Gachin also makes the important point that there's no universally normal frequency of sex. It varies greatly from couple to couple.
We often compare, don't we?
We often make comparisons without knowing the full picture of someone else's relationship.
That's a really important reminder. We often compare our insides to other people's outsides, as the saying goes.
Furthermore, Gachin points out that satisfying sexual intimacy often requires ongoing effort, intentional planning, being fully present in the moment.
It's not always spontaneous.
Not always spontaneous, despite that being a common misconception, often fueled by media. Early in relationships, couples often do prioritize making time and being present.
But that can fade.
That can sometimes fade over time. Our past experiences, societal messages, our own personal insecurities, they all contribute to shaping these often unrealistic expectations we carry.
So what's the way forward? How do we manage these sexpectations?
Gachin strongly advocates for examining our own individual expectations and engaging in open, honest conversations with our partners.
Talking about it.
About our needs, our desires, even our fears. Often simply talking about it and realizing that your own experiences are likely more normal than you might think. That can be incredibly beneficial. It reduces pressure, increases understanding.
That makes perfect sense.
Right?
Communication really does seem to be a central theme in all aspects of sexual health and relationships.
Absolutely.
Now, Let's consider navigating intimacy after a period of sexual sobriety, particularly for individuals in recovery from addiction.
Yeah, the Integrative Life Center highlights that while a period of abstinence is often a critical initial step in recovery,
Mhm.
the ultimate goal isn't necessarily a life of celibacy. Reestablishing a healthy sexual life after achieving sexual sobriety is a very attainable and desirable outcome.
But it's a process.
It's a process that requires patience and shouldn't be rushed.
So it's about redefining one's relationship with sex rather than necessarily eliminating it entirely.
Precisely. A fundamental step is prioritizing non-sexual intimacy, nurturing that emotional connection with your partner, with family, even with yourself.
That foundation.
This strong foundation of emotional intimacy is crucial for building a healthy sexual intimacy that isn't driven by the compulsivity and pressures associated with addiction.
And what does sober sex actually look like? It sounds like it would be a very individual experience.
It is indeed highly individualized. The Integrative Life Center discusses the importance of establishing clear boundaries.
Boundaries. Like what?
Inner boundaries define the specific problematic sexual behaviors to avoid. Middle boundaries identify the triggers and warning signs that might lead back to those behaviors.
Okay.
And outer boundaries outline the characteristics of a long-term sexually sober lifestyle. Having this well-defined framework can provide crucial accountability and guidance.
They also outline some key characteristics of healthy intimacy within a sexually sober relationship, didn't they?
Yes, they emphasized aspects like mutual well-being, where sexual intimacy fosters feelings of affirmation and safety rather than shame or guilt.
What else?
Emotional vulnerability, the ability to openly share feelings and needs, exploring non-genital forms of pleasure as another important aspect of intimacy.
Right, not just focus on one thing.
Exactly, developing healthy coping mechanisms for stress and difficult emotions, and a strong foundation of trust between partners. It's about creating a relationship where sex is integrated into a context of emotional connection and mutual respect.
And for individuals on this path, what kind of support is available beyond individual therapy? We've mentioned support groups a couple of times now.
Support groups can be incredibly valuable for individuals navigating sex and porn addiction recovery. They provide a vital space for emotional and moral support
From people who get it.
from others who truly understand the specific challenges involved. This shared experience can significantly reduce feelings of isolation, shame, and loneliness, which are often huge barriers to recovery.
The Integrative Life Center listed several reputable options, like Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA, and Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, SLAA.
Yes, SAA focuses specifically on stopping addictive sexual behavior through the framework of the 12 steps. While SLAA addresses addictive patterns in both sexual behavior and emotional attachments, they also mentioned the Samson Society, which is tailored for Christian men, and Pornography Addicts Anonymous, PAA.
And they all use the 12 steps.
All of these groups typically center around the application of the 12 steps principles within a supportive community setting.
And it's not just for the individuals who are struggling directly, is it? There are also support groups available for partners and other loved ones.
Absolutely. Essanon is a worldwide fellowship specifically for the family members and friends of individuals struggling with sex or pornography addiction.
What do they offer?
These groups offer a safe and supportive space to address the trauma of betrayal, the other significant challenges they face, and to focus on their own healing and well-being. Support groups can be a tremendously valuable addition to professional treatment for both the individual in recovery and their loved ones.
Now let's pivot a bit and consider some of the broader societal forces at play. Starting with the issue of sexual double standards. Research from the University of Guelph highlighted some persistent inequalities here.
Yeah, Professor Robin Milhausen's research indicates that, unfortunately, a significant sexual double standard persists, particularly concerning single women.
How so?
They are often judged more harshly for engaging in sexual behavior compared to single men. There's still this underlying societal expectation that women should ideally remain abstinent when single,
But then be experienced later.
but then possess adequate sexual experience within a relationship. It's a bit of a no-win situation.
It really does create a double bind, doesn't it?
Right.
You're almost criticized regardless of your choices.
Exactly. And Professor Milhausen suggests that the consistent no and danger messages that girls and young women often receive about their sexuality throughout their development, that can contribute to negative associations with sex later in life, potentially leading to issues like low sexual desire, difficulty achieving orgasm. These messages can become deeply internalized.
And it's not just women who are affected by these ingrained double standards, is it?
No, men also face unrealistic and often contradictory expectations. That persistent societal misconception that men are always ready and willing to engage in sexual activity,
Creates pressure.
it creates a significant amount of pressure. If a man isn't immediately in the mood or experiences any difficulties, there's often a sense of shame or a belief that something is wrong with him or his partner.
Hmm.
The research also revealed a prevailing belief that women have more emotional and physical prerequisites for sex, while for men it's often viewed as a purely physical act.
Which really ties into that traditional idea of women being taught that sex should be inherently linked to love and emotional connection,
Right.
potentially making it more difficult to embrace sexuality outside of that specific context.
Precisely. However, Professor Milhausen finds the increasing prevalence of friends with benefits relationships to be an interesting development,
Oh, how so?
suggesting that these types of relationships might offer some women a space to explore their sexuality and understand their own desires outside of those more traditional, maybe restrictive scripts.
So these persistent double standards create a lot of pressure and unrealistic expectations for everyone, ultimately impacting their sexual well-being.
Definitely.
Let's move on to another really powerful societal influence: toxic masculinity.
Right. Toxic masculinity, as defined by the ISSM, the International Society for Sexual Medicine, refers to harmful and restrictive cultural norms. Norms that dictate a narrow, damaging definition of what it means to be a man.
Like what?
This often includes suppressing emotions, the constant need to exhibit aggression, and rejecting any form of vulnerability.
And how does this specifically impact sexual functioning and experiences?
The ISSM highlights several key ways. The societal discouragement of emotional expression in men, beyond perhaps anger or stoicism, that can significantly hinder intimacy in relationships
And affect sexual experiences.
and negatively affect sexual experiences. Research indicates a clear link between adhering to these traditional masculine norms and lower levels of emotional expressiveness,
Which leads to poorer communication.
which in turn often leads to poorer communication about sexual needs and desires.
That makes perfect sense. If you're not able to communicate openly and honestly about your feelings, it's hard to achieve genuine intimacy.
Exactly. There's also the immense pressure placed on men to conform to often unrealistic standards of sexual performance.
Always confident, always in control.
Always confident, always assertive, always in control. This can lead to significant anxiety, performance stress,
And even dysfunction.
and even manifest in sexual dysfunctions, such as erectile dysfunction and reduced overall sexual satisfaction. Furthermore, the lack of emotional intimacy fostered by these norms can directly correlate with lower levels of sexual satisfaction within relationships.
And the consequences can extend even further, can't they? The Reddit discussion, well, anecdotal, touched on some darker historical aspects.
Yes, and it's important to remember that Reddit discussions are anecdotal, but the thread raised important points about the historical context of assumed consent, the deeply ingrained power dynamics that have existed between men and women. It highlights how some of these problematic ideas about masculinity and femininity are very deeply rooted in historical structures and societal norms. The ISSM also emphasizes that toxic masculinity can contribute to harmful behaviors like sexual violence and coercion.
Through its emphasis on dominance and control.
Exactly.
So really dismantling toxic masculinity requires a significant shift in cultural attitudes and beliefs. What are some of the key steps in that direction?
The ISM emphasizes the importance of encouraging open, honest conversations about gender norms, creating environments where men feel safe and comfortable expressing a full range of emotions,
And support?
and providing accessible mental health support and education about what constitutes healthy relationships. Promoting positive role models who embrace vulnerability and emotional expression is also absolutely crucial.
It sounds like media has a really significant role to play in both perpetuating and challenging these norms,
Huge role.
which brings us to our final area of focus today.
Indeed. The NSVRC, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, powerfully illustrates just how influential media is. Social media, TV, movies, ads.
It shapes everything.
It shapes cultural trends, social norms, even our own internal sense of self. It establishes benchmarks for how people are expected to look, act, and live.
They gave that really striking example of the increase in eating disorders in Fiji following the introduction of Western television,
Right.
which clearly demonstrates how media can actually create internal changes in how we perceive ourselves and our bodies.
That example really underscores the profound power of media to shape our perceptions of what's considered normal or desirable. The NSVRC points out that we often absorb these media images from a very young age
And see them as reality.
and tend to view them as direct reflections of reality, rather than as carefully constructed messages with underlying agendas. This is why developing strong media literacy skills is so essential.
Understanding it's a construction.
Understanding that media are creations with subtext, with often subtle but powerful messages.
It's about learning to critically analyze those underlying messages and challenge stereotypes, rather than just passively consuming what we see and hear.
Exactly. And when it comes to the topics of sex and relationships, many individuals, particularly young people, learn about norms and expectations through media, including pornography,
Often before they've had real conversations.
often before they have had adequate educational conversations or developed a nuanced understanding. This can lead to very skewed understandings of sex, pleasure, consent.
And there's research on porn's impact.
Research even suggests links between early pornography consumption in teenagers, an earlier initiation of sexual activity, a greater number of sexual partners, and negative impacts on body image, increased performance anxiety.
And the way that sexual violence is portrayed in media can be particularly damaging for survivors,
Absolutely.
and can unfortunately reinforce harmful myths and misunderstandings about what sexual assault actually looks like.
The NSVRC highlights how media often romanticizes or sensationalizes sexual assault, downplays the harm it causes, or even completely erases the problematic aspects within certain relationships.
Even news reporting.
Even news reporting can sometimes fall into these traps, perpetuating harmful rape myths, using stereotypical portrayals of victims. This can significantly impact whether individuals even recognize their own experiences as sexual assault.
If it doesn't match the media script.
Exactly, if it doesn't align with those media-driven scripts. And the underrepresentation and often harmful portrayal of male survivors of sexual violence in media is also a really significant issue.
Ultimately, the NSVRC argues that media has historically often adhered to these very binary and patriarchal fantasies, reinforcing harmful gender norms and even contributing to the normalization of sexual violence.
And the hypermasculine ideals often depicted in media create equally damaging and unattainable standards for men.
So, cultivating media literacy.
Practicing critical consumption, actively demanding more accurate and diverse representations in media, these are essential tools for challenging these harmful influences and fostering a more equitable, healthy understanding of sex, relationships, and consent in our society.
This has been a truly deep and insightful exploration to some really complex and interconnected issues. Just to recap some of the key takeaways.
Yeah.
Pornography addiction carries significant personal and relational consequences. These challenges are often intensified by unrealistic expectations and negative self-esteem.
Right. And societal pressures like persistent sexual double standards and the pervasive influence of toxic masculinity play a significant role in shaping our experiences.
And media, in its many forms, powerfully shapes our understanding of sex and relationships, often in ways that can be problematic and harmful.
However, as we've discussed, recovery and the development of a healthier sexuality are indeed possible through increased self-awareness, open and honest communication,
The supportive community?
the supportive community, and by actively challenging those harmful norms we've explored today.
So here's a final thought for you, our listeners.
Considering the far-reaching influence of media and the deeply ingrained nature of societal expectations around sex and masculinity, what small but significant shift in perspective, or perhaps a courageous conversation, could you initiate in your own life or within your community?
To help foster a more realistic, compassionate, and ultimately healthier understanding of sexual health and overall well-being.
That's something to really consider after our deep dive today.